the European Parliament is a place of dialogue, and this is how all discussions should be carried on. And when it comes to minority rights, the rights of the traditional people living in the European states, it is more so because we need to be solidar with each other. Minority groups should not be toys of geopolitical confrontation or any kind of political struggle. Also, I think it is important for that reason the very existence of the minority intergroup, because we are bringing into the discussion a topic, minority rights, that is not an EU competence, yet we managed to bring together members from the different political groups, and we are able to have a dialogue and even proposals and hopefully some concrete results in the field of minority rights. The background of the different minority communities is very different. Our history is very different. The size of the communities is different. I am coming from Romania indeed, and I represent the Hungarian community, which is 1,200,000 people. You could say it is a big number of people, a sizable community, but we have our own problems. We have our own struggle with the Romanian state, with the Romanian authorities, when we try to have a legislative framework that helps the development of this community. And when we are speaking about communities with only a few thousand speakers, like the Germans in Slovenia or the Sorbian minority in Germany, they have totally different agenda. They have totally different goals and objectives than the bigger ones. Of course, it is very different how the member states, the states of the European Union, approach minority rights. The first level is always the recognition of the minority groups, and my colleague François Alfonsi told you about the example of France, and I could add Greece, like states that don't recognize the minorities living on their territory, which is not okay, because the groups themselves should have the right of self-affirmation, the right to say who they are, what language they speak, what is their identity, and they have the right to express this identity. And then in the different states we have different levels of minority rights. The majority of the communities have some individual rights. They have the right to learn in the mother tongue in some levels of education. They have the right to use the language in an appropriate format in the different municipalities. And then there is a third category of minority groups that are able to administer themselves. They have autonomy, like it is the case of German-speaking community in Italy, or the Swedish-speaking people in Finland, the Germans here in Belgium, and so on. This is the highest level of recognition. In the Federal Union of European Nationalities, and the FUN that I represent, we have 107 minority organizations from all over Europe. So not only the EU member states, but the Council of Europe states as well. We have minorities from Russia and neighboring countries, but we have, of course, Russian minority from the Baltic states. And I believe the solidarity that we were able to show during these years and the unanimous approach of the proposals that we had on different levels, be it regional or European, managed to create this common aim of the different groups. And this common aim, the most simple denominator, is our demand to be able to preserve our identity, to have the right to the recognition of our identity, to have the right to speak our language, and to be able to have education in mother tongue. Then, of course, we have culture, the right to have our own cultural institutions and to preserve our traditions, our culture. Since minority rights are member state competence, this is how the treaties of the EU regulated this topic. We cannot say that this minority situation is solved in all the member states, because the minorities themselves say that things are not okay. When minority schools are under attack in some Baltic states, that is not okay. When the right to use the mother tongue is not allowed by the state, this is also not fine. When minorities are not able to be recognized in their state, as I told you, this is the basic level of non-recognition or non-existence of minorities, and this is also not okay. Not only from a member state perspective, not only from a human rights perspective, because in my opinion minority rights are human rights, but also from a value perspective, the perspective of the European integration and the European Union itself. In the second article of the European Union's treaty, we have enshrined the support for minorities written in the Article 2, but we had never any concrete action in preserving these minorities, which we believe also traditional minorities, ethnic minorities are included in. The European Union should have a responsibility in the preservation of the minority languages, in the preservation of minority cultures. We cannot speak about a common European identity, European way of life, if we neglect part of this European heritage, the minority languages and the minority cultures. It means that itself the European Union has to invest in the preservation and in the development of the minority communities. The majority of the minorities from all over Europe face assimilation. They face language loss, as we heard in the case of Corsica, and there could be many other examples. Assimilation means that less and less people have the identity of that language or that community. Less and less people are able to speak the minority language, and it is something that we lose together, Europeans, if one language, if one culture will be erased on our continent, in our union. So the project that we developed in the FUN, and we had many, many partners, many supporters from all over Europe, the Minorities Safe Pack initiative, intends really to promote within the European Union the protection of the European linguistic and cultural diversity. We want the European Union to realize that it needs to invest, to fund the language and cultural projects of our communities. And we were able to raise more than 1,200,000 signatures in Europe for this project. It was a really huge and most likely the biggest project in the last 3 decades from a minority rights perspective in the European Union. And we will present these signatures to the European Commission. They asked us to postpone the presentation of the signatures until January, when the new Commission will be able to fully function. And we also prepared the legislative proposals with this package, because we want the European Union not only to say nice words about how the citizens can participate and can propose projects, but we want to see it realized. It is the European Citizens' Initiative, this legal instrument in the EU that has never been achieved from the beginning till the end with none of the citizens' initiative that were proposed until today. There were five proposals in total. Four had never any legislative action afterwards, and we would like the fifth one, our Minority Safe Pack initiative, to be the one that would trigger a positive decision of the European Commission that they will start legislative action. We will have to follow it closely and intervene from here, from the European Parliament, when we will organize a hearing and a debate in the European Parliament, so that we put this pressure on the European Commission to decide on starting the legislative process. It would be something really helpful for all the communities. It does not mean that directly it will solve the problem of the Russian school in Estonia or Latvia, but it will open the European Union's legislation for the minority languages, for the minority cultures. It will be the first time, and once the door is open, you know, then you can go into that room and start to fill it with content, with furniture. In my opinion, we are on the right road. It was a road that we took together with many European minorities, with many communities, with many organizations. It was a huge common effort, and I believe that we have all the chances of success. I believe such occasions as this conference, to have dialogue on the role of the Russian language, of the Russian communities in Europe, is a very important one. Culture and language can be something that brings people together rather than tearing us apart. We should leave out from this dialogue the political struggles and the different geopolitical interests, as I said in the beginning, and focus on what is important for the people. And the people, minority groups from all over Europe, want to live freely. They want equality of chances to use their language, to fulfill their culture, to be able to pass this heritage to the next generation.